Business activity, which speaks to actual manufacturing, rose by 5.3 points to 51.4, while new sales orders also rose, driven by domestic demand, registering in at 45.4 points, up 10 notches on the previous month. The employment index also rose by 4 points, while cost pressures were described as muted, with the purchasing price index up 2.1 points at 52.1.
And I think if you look at the underlying indices that support the headline index, we saw that demand picked up by quite a bit, so that new sales orders sub-index did record quite a big jump in January, even though it still remained below that 50 mark, which separates an expansion from a contraction. But I think it is still quite significant enough to lift the PMI. And as you saw, that helped to sort of support a recovery in activity. So the business activity sub-index did edge up to above the 50 points, which is quite encouraging, and also signals that official manufacturing output likely increased during the month. But overall, I think most of the indices did show an improvement in January, which is quite encouraging. So it was a broad-based recovery within the PMI data.
Nondudule noted that export demand declined somewhat in the month, citing the stronger rand, which makes the country's exports more expensive, as one of the factors contributing to this. However, overall, she indicated that while the expected business conditions index declined by over 2 points to 66.4, it still suggests that manufacturing players were still positive about the future.
In terms of the expectations, they did fall slightly, but still at quite optimistic levels. So we think that firms remain optimistic about the outlook for the sector in 6 months' time. And in terms of what's shaping, those expectations, we believe, it's a much more improved, macroeconomic backdrop, especially locally. We've had lower inflation rates, we've had lower interest rates, but also growth has been much stronger than expected in terms of real GDP growth. So I think a combination of those things is likely supporting the outlook for the sector.
The purchasing price index, which speaks to producer costs, was up 2.1 notches at 52.1 points in January. However, Absa says while the stronger rand could pose some headwinds for exporters, it should be positive from a cost of manufacturing point of view, as import costs will be lower, which also in turn results in lower fuel prices. Nompumelelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.